welcome to a brand new episode of the Story to Screen podcast, the movie podcast where we review all different kinds of movies, new and old. I am your host, Chris, and joining me tonight, as usual, is Joshua Ling. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
What's up, man? What's the word?
The word is tired. I am tired from so much stuff, and I'm not going to get into all this craziness that's been going on. And Black Friday. Yesterday was Life and Black Friday. Anyway, folks, tonight's movie review is the 2005 live-action adaptation of C.S. Lewis's timeless classic, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's directed by Andrew Adamson and stars a bunch of kid actors that, unfortunately, may not have been the next Harry Potter movie stars.
Mrs. McCready.
I'm afraid so.
The professor is unaccustomed to having children in this house. And as such, there are a few rules we need to follow. There will be no shouting or running, no sliding on the banisters, no touching of the historical artifacts. And above all, there shall be no disturbing of the professor.
96, 97, 98, 99, 100. Ready or not, here I come.
What you just heard was the trailer for The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Thank you very much, and it was directed by Andrew Adamson and stars, again, a bunch of children's stars that we haven't seen very much of lately. And I don't even remember their names, unfortunately. Okay, William Moseley, Anna Popplewell, I think.
Yep. Skandar Keynes and Georgie Henley.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And James McAvoy and Tilda Swinton. Oh, man. Those are actors who have gone on to greater successful things in their career recently.
Well, Narnia was pretty successful, but yeah.
Well, yeah. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Anyway, Joshua, what's been your relationship with the Narnia books, that world, as well as the film itself?
Well, I cannot remember a time without Narnia. I don't think that there's a more influential fantasy world to me than Narnia. There's a few that are close, such as Middle-earth and Andrew Peterson's Ere We Are and Stephen Lawhead's Albion, but the thing that really sticks out to me is I have never known a time without Narnia. My dad started reading them to me at a very, very young age. Mainly just The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then one day I found out that there were more, and I asked him to read them to me, and needless to say, my dad's probably read them to us kids probably 4 or 5 times all the way through. I've been reading them to Casey, like I said. We're going to be starting Prince Caspian soon, and it's something that I want to continue to share with my family. It's sort of an official Ling family story to a certain extent.
Okay. And what has been your relationship with the film?
Well, I went to see it opening day 2005. I actually dressed up in a homemade Hiking Peter and his armor costume. I had a plastic, those cheap plastic baseball helmets that aren't meant to protect anything. It's just kind of like, a Bat Boy's helmet or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I took one of those. I turned it backwards and I covered it in silver duct tape and created a little like non-movable visor out of cardboard and duct tape. And then I made the tunic, and I had fake chainmail and all that other kind of stuff. And Christopher, my brother, dressed up as a dwarf. My sister dressed up as a dryad, and let's see, I think Jonathan may have dressed up as something, but I don't remember. And my friend James Stokely actually dressed up as like a Narnian squire of some variety. So that was kind of cool. But we all went dressed up for the premiere, and I don't think it disappointed me. I really enjoyed it. So.
Okay. And what have been like your initial impressions of the film?
Nowadays, like more recently?
Yeah, like what's let me go ahead. Let me just give my thoughts quickly. The Narnia books, I have not read those books in in almost like a decade. It's been within a decade since the last time I've read the books. And I've read all 7 of them, and they're great, children's books, and they're also wonderfully written by C.S. Lewis, who's a great author, and I think we highly recommend any piece of his literature that he has written to anyone, especially to our listeners. I think he's a very good scholarly writer and also fantasy fictional writer as well. But anyway, my relationship with the film. I remember seeing it back in 2005, and it was, 2005, Christmas 2005, that was like 2 years after Return of the King had come out. And Return of the King in some way was kind of like the end of an era for me. It was the end of my childhood and the beginning of my, teenage years. I was turning 14 that year, and so that, so there was a massive void in my life, the whole, going to see a new Lord of the Rings movie every, Christmas, and then, there was also the Harry Potter films going on as well. But, when I went to go see this, I was kind of nervous. I was not gonna lie. I was really nervous because I was like, is this going to be kind of one of those fantasy films that's trying to mimic the success, or is it going to try to be its own unique thing? And I've got to applaud the filmmakers for doing not just an admirable job of bringing to life the Narnia story, but also maintaining the spiritual context of the story. And that's something that we can discuss, a lot more in detail later on the podcast about that. And so it's a movie that I really enjoyed. And you know what? In preparation for this review, I have not seen this movie in 11 years.
Oh, wow.
So just the other night, I had seen Narnia for the first time in 11 years. And I was wondering, if the film was going to hold up. And we'll go ahead and talk about that, Do you think it still holds up? On its own, does it hold up as a film?
Well, really, to me, I think that it does hold up. There's a couple of things that kind of grounded in that fantasy buzz of post Lord of the Rings and everything. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they weren't able to complete the series during that fantasy buzz. I think that, you had mentioned, and we can get into that particular point, that the child actors were wooden in some way. I would argue that Georgie Henley as Lucy is absolutely endearing. Edmund, I thought he was good with what he was given. I felt like some of his dialogue from the book had been stripped away, and he became a little bit more neutered than the nasty Edmund that we see in the book.
Okay.
I feel like Susan in the book and in the, and this is a problem with the book, not just the movie, but Susan is kind of a nothing character, and they tried to give her a little bit more something to do, and it didn't really work. She kind of was a nag. And then Peter, while William Moseley comes across a little bit wooden, I feel like that was intentional because he is sort of that square-jawed hero. And I feel like the reason for that was he's actually, and this could be a William Moseley thing, like he could have been a good enough actor to come up with this, but I think it's more a directorial choice. In that I think they were trying to go for somebody who was, how do I put this?
An innocence?
Someone who has an enormous weight on his shoulders and is trying to focus to the point where he's not feeling anything. Does that make sense?
I understand that, and I don't know if... Okay, because rewatching the film, I remember when I watched the film back in 2005, I really liked what William Moseley had done, but that was back in my stupider days. Anyway, I didn't know any better, so... Anyway, I was kind of wondering what... when I was watching the performance now, I was like, wow, I can't believe how William Moseley was stiff, in so many of his scenes, and I think... I don't know if it's a situation of just talent... just not used properly, or if it's just direction. There are moments where it feels like he's giving like a high school performance, high school play performance. You know what I mean? It feels something like that, and he's not believable in the way that Georgie Henley's Lucy is. I think Lucy actually bears the weight of the film in much more significant ways than any of the other children actors. I think she's the one that really, really works because it's seen from her point of view. Now, but back to William Moseley, I don't, he's supposed to be kind of the hero, and I don't think he had that. I don't think he really brought that to the table. And I think of all the, I kind of think of like, of all the other young, kind of talented young actors out there, I think there was somebody much more capable of kind of doing the Peter character a little bit more justice than what William Moseley brought,
It is possible.
I think the kid from Aragorn could have done a better job. The kid from Aragorn? I don't remember his name.
I don't think so, but I was not a fan of him. But I will say that I don't think William Moseley, I won't say he wasn't the right choice, but he definitely could have been better, based on my own imagination of Peter, at least that by that standard. I will say though that I kind of got the impression that a lot of his woodenness was Andrew Adamson's direction, in that he was focusing much more on Peter's worry and fear, and overcoming that fear and the weight of responsibility that his mother and the professor put on his shoulders as the oldest, and he was putting on himself as the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that way they really did succeed in the movie in showing Peter growing up to be this king. And I think when he is crowned High King Peter the Magnificent, that he, like, you can see it on his face, and the camera angle's perfect. You see someone who's just reached another level. Unfortunately, we don't get to see much of that other level. We only get to see the adult actor playing him toward the end, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Maybe we could talk about if he progresses both as a person in the later films, like Prince Caspian, or maybe even Don Treader, But I'm just trying to remember. They seem to look like they were in the proper time period, like their looks and all that stuff. I think they had that kind of 1940s, 1950s look.
They definitely didn't act it though, and that's one of the issues that I did have with the film is they took out a lot of the particularly British dialogue to try and make it more of a wide appeal to audiences. Things like Peter saying when they first get to the professor's house and everything, he says in the movie something to the effect of, "Oh, this is going to be great. You know, we're going to have the whole place to ourselves, etc." Which is very generic. But in the book, he said something to the effect of, "We've landed on our feet, and make no mistake." You know, it was much more British characterized and much more of the time period that C.S. Lewis was writing than the movie was.
Yeah, but here's the other thing too. You don't really. I mean, I think it's very much established in the first chapter in the first paragraph that the story does take place during the Blitz and that they're being evacuated. But you don't really get a sense of the circumstances leading up to them going to the professor's house in the book. I mean, pretty much for the most part, it's straight up like they're there. Let's get on with it. So Andrew Adamson really added that kind of really neat little the prologue with the Blitz and all that stuff, the British, the bombing and all that stuff, which I think that was a good way to kind of start off the film, and then and then to kind of steer us into the direction that we go with this film. I guess we'll kind of divide this. We'll definitely. Do you view this film as a 3-act film or 5-act structure story wise?
I mean, I'm not positive. I really have to think about it. The story's just so second nature to me now that I feel like I don't know how I would describe it, honestly.
Okay. I mean,
the story definitely has rising action, then a plateau and then falling action, like a 3-act structure generally would, but it has that climax and all that other kind of stuff, but it's like, I don't know how exactly to categorize it. It flows well.
Yeah.
I feel like well enough to where I haven't ever really thought of the structure of it.
Okay. I mean, I do view, like, film-wise, I do think I think it's very much a 3-act, and you can make the argument for 5, but I am going to view it as a 3-act film. First act being everything up until Lucy. Lucy comes back from her first trip in Narnia. Second act is everything concerning Edmund and the whole exploration.
Getting to Aslan.
Getting to Aslan and getting through all of that stuff where up until until the children get to Aslan, and then everything from there on out is the 3rd act. The whole stuff with the battle, because I do see the battle and the symbolic crucifixion scene with Aslan taking up a good chunk of the film. Now, anyway, I did want to talk about something real quickly about the structure of the film, because I look at the first half of this film. There's a very weird feeling when I was watching it this time. Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, when you watch those films, there's a vastness to them. You feel this vast and openness to them. This is really weird. I never noticed it before, but watching it the other day, I was not feeling the vastness of Narnia in like the first half of this film. And what I mean... Yeah,
no, I think that's on purpose, actually.
You think so? Okay. Well, explain why you think that is.
Well, particularly because in the books, the first half of it is meant to convey not a giant wood or something like that. It just... Woods tend to be very intimate to begin with, right? And so I think that the purpose of that whole scene is you're walking from this extremely cramped place, and it's opening out into vastness. And when you watch the movie, it really does. Narnia opens out. You start out in the forest, and it starts out really, in the wardrobe, really cramped space, and then you get out into the Lantern Waste, and you have the whole area, and it's kind of cozy. You go to Mr. Tumnus's home, also cozy. Continue on out. You've got the waterfall at the Fords of Baruna. You have all kinds of other, the Beaver's Dam, and things start to open up. You get the White Witch's castle. Things are continuing to open up. And then by the end, we get to this giant field that we have the Battle of Baruna in. And it's almost as if, the vastness of Narnia is shown in that one moment alone. It's not meant to be conveyed in the same way Lord of the Rings is, or even Harry Potter. It's meant to be conveyed in a way that is opening and closing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, I get that, and I can maybe understand that to a certain degree, but I guess for me, the filmmaker in me is kind of like, I get the sense like a lot of this was shot on sound stages, like I never really got a sense that they were on location until all the Aslan stuff was. I felt like that was on location, but with like all the stuff with them, like running through the woods and all that stuff, that felt to me very much like a sound stage, and I think that sense of seclusion and all that stuff, and I can understand that that's what Lewis was trying to convey in the book, because it's the snow, and with snow kind of lends this seclusion, to it, because especially when we're talking about a world like this that has been trapped in this frozen world for almost like, what is it, like is it 100 years or hundreds of years?
Yeah, it's 100. It's a 100-year winter.
Yeah. So I think that can work, and I think that works to some degree. But I don't know. Like I kind of have a mixed feeling about that whole idea about that secluded, the lack of vastness. But I don't know. This is a very different story from what Tolkien was writing. Which in that book he gives a vivid, like explicit details about
right
the nature and the environment. Okay,
and that's why even though Lewis and Tolkien were contemporaries, comparing Narnia to Lord of the Rings is like comparing apples to oranges. It really is.
Yeah.
Narnia is much more of a fairy tale. It's much more of a fantasy, honestly. Tolkien is high fantasy. Tolkien is all about the myth and the legend and building this very realistic world. It's almost like if Zack Snyder was good, his DC would be considered like Lord of the Rings, and Marvel would be considered Narnia. It's meant to be something that's more friendly and fantastical and bright and that sort of a thing. And Lord of the Rings is meant to be a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more serious, a little bit more depthy, a lot more depthy. Mm-hmm. But Narnia is a little bit more at conveying emotions, and I feel like Lord of the Rings is a little bit more at conveying, how do I put it? Something you can chew on a little bit more, almost more like history.
Yeah. It's a much more meatier thing. But, kind of going into the plot a little bit more, I mean, we get into the whole stuff with her finding the wardrobe, and then she goes through it, and then she finds the lamppost. Now, and the fawn. Now, according to C.S. Lewis's words, these are actually the very first images that he had visioned for the Narnia books.
Yep.
The idea of a fawn and the lamppost. Now,
and the fawn was carrying parcels with an umbrella in a snowy wood. Yep.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Now, does knowing C.S. Lewis and his theology, was the lamp supposed to bear any significance was it supposed to be symbolizing something bigger?
Well, we could get into Magician's Nephew spoilers, but for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, you can check it out in Magician's Nephew. We do get the origins of the lamppost. I won't go into them, but we do get the origins of it. You know what I'm talking about, Chris?
Yes, I do know that. And it was funny when I watched this movie, I was getting all the Magician's Nephew hints and references and all that stuff.
Yes, definitely. And there are a lot of them in there. I think, who's the actor who plays Diggory? Professor Kirk?
Oh gosh.
Jim Broadbent.
Okay.
Jim Broadbent. Jim Broadbent did an excellent job as Diggory. But the whole situation there, I think it lends itself to this idea of familiarity. I think that I really think the purpose of the lamppost in the story, even before he wrote Magician's Nephew, was that it is something familiar in an otherworldly place, something that's inviting and homely, even though this world is strange and mystical and fantastic.
Okay, no, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. That's a really good point.
Because the lamppost is essentially from England. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And then we get into the stuff with the Fawn, who's played wonderfully well by James McAvoy, who this is like, well, let me see. Yeah, this is like a year or two before he does Atonement, which that puts him on the on the critical map, and then a couple years later he does X-Men. He plays Professor X and all that stuff. He has had one of those really interesting careers that has gone far beyond what he's done with Narnia.
Definitely.
Yeah, and his scenes with Lucy are very good. Like,
oh, excellent.
Yeah, they're so good, and for a little girl who I don't think really had that much acting at this point in time, she has so much chemistry with her surroundings. And I love the way that Andrew Adamson directs her, because it's this childlike wonderment that.
Well, are you aware of what they did to get her reaction when she first came into Narnia?
No, not at all.
Oh, you don't know this story?
No.
Well, the first time she saw the Narnia set is the specifically the Lantern Waste set.
Mm-hmm.
They told her they were going to be rolling. So they said, be in character. But it was the first time she saw the set.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So everything that you see from her walking in the wardrobe is from that one shot. They did a couple other shots, but they kept everything from that first set of shots.
Ah, that's what makes the performance so unique.
Right? It really does, because she's seeing this unbelievable set that they built. It was on a soundstage, but it was a very, very large soundstage. It was a huge hangar.
Oh yeah,
that they built this in, and they had the snow coming down and all that other stuff. And it was the very first time she had seen the set, and they said, "Just be Lucy." And she said in an interview she was very, very focused on being Lucy. And when she walked into that set, she forgot everything about being Lucy and just was a kid.
How old was she when she did that?
And so it was just a completely natural reaction.
Yeah. How old was she? Like 10, 8 or 9, something like that?
I think she was 10 or 11 at the time that she filmed. I don't remember for sure. But yeah.
Okay. But no, that's a really cool fact, man. I did not know that, and that really lends a different perspective on that one moment right there. And that's pretty good, because you can't really get that once. You can only get that either once or a couple times with a child actor, So definitely. Anyway, I guess we'll talk about the Tumnus. Mr. Tumnus. Now, what I like about what James McAvoy plays is that there's a huge reluctancy. You don't know. He's so nice and appealing at first, but then you find out that, of course, that he is kind of working for the White Witch and all that stuff, and you don't really know to what extent he's working for her, like if he's on her payroll or what have you. But what I like about him is that there is he's very reluctant of what he's done. He is not very comfortable, or he's not satisfied with what he's done. And I think McAvoy kind of plays those strings pretty well.
Yeah, I honestly feel like, I don't know. I love his performance. I think he's great as Tumnus. I just think that there was something about it that seemed too, what's the word? Pitiable about him. I feel like there should have been a certain point where, I think more so when he was playing the flute, there should have been a very brief malevolence, like, okay, I finally got her.
I think it's there. I think it's there. Like, when he's playing, the moment that he's playing, and the way that McAvoy just uses his eyes to convey, this sinister kind of really interesting kind of look. You get the sense that he's going to do something else to her or something like that, and he's trying to charm her in a very seductive way. And it's very, in the way that McAvoy uses his eyes to convey that when he's playing the flute. And I love how with the flute, they didn't go for like, some kind of more like nursery kind of rhyming feel. Because I actually heard that in the radio adaptation of Narnia. They use kind of like a nursery type of rhythm, nursery rhyme type of rhythm to it. But in this one, it's kind of Arabic or some sort of foreign country that sounds.
It's Celtic. It is a Celtic melody, but it is a darker Celtic melody.
Mm-hmm.
I did really like it after I heard it, but the one thing that it doesn't quite fit with the book with me on is it definitely feels hypnotic.
Mm-hmm.
It gets the job done, but in the book, it specifically talks about the fact that it made Lucy want to jump for joy and go to sleep and have it and like a delicious smell wafted by, and all these emotions all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it conveyed all of those emotions, and that's really hard to do with a piece of music, but I think it is doable. I just think that they essentially went for, well, what do we need plot-wise to go by? Don't worry about the book. Just plot-wise, it needs to sound hypnotic. Go.
Yeah, no, I think that's what makes it work, and what McAvoy is conveying right there.
Sure.
The blend of the two.
How about Harry Gregson Williams' score in this movie? Isn't it gorgeous?
I like the Narnia theme. I like the duh, duh, duh. I can't. It doesn't. You know what? I'm not gonna lie. I don't feel like the rest of the score stands out to me the way that Harry Potter or even like Lord of the, like what Howard Shore brought to Middle Earth. I think that's the one thing about this movie that doesn't really stand out to me. I mean, it's good in the moment. I think I have the CD, but I don't think it really, except for the actual like Narnia theme when it gets to those moments.
There is one other piece that stands out to me, and that is the Father Christmas theme. I think the Father Christmas theme is absolutely gorgeous. The rest of the score, I think, just underplays the movie perfectly. I don't think a lot of it stands out, but I do think that the bombastic Narnia theme, which is da 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 da, yep, that one.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very nice. And then the tinkling sort of piano sound of Father Christmas's theme, and it comes in with the choir singing in a very silvery, snowy tone. I thought was particularly nice. I love the fact that they kept Father Christmas, because they didn't keep Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings.
Well, here's another thing, too. In the book, they refer to him as Father Christmas, but they don't do it here.
That's true, and I think the reason was the same reason they stripped a lot of the British stuff out of it. It's just... I don't think they were trying to go for mass appeal with that.
I think anybody can easily enough assume that, okay, so this is Narnia's Santa Claus, I think
right.
That's what essentially Father Christmas is. I mean, he's the British version of Santa Claus, So,
right.
And I love it how Lucy says, to Susan, told you he exists, I love that little,
right.
I love that little line delivery right there. But I do find it kind of interesting that they did bring in, that kind of that character, that kind of, the Santa Claus character into this film,
and I think it worked, honestly.
Yeah, it's mainly more of a screenplay or more of a story device to get the children their stuff.
Yeah, I think it's more than that.
I'm sure there's more to it, and do you want to go? Why not go and share that with us?
The biggest thing that it comes to is we actually have more so in the book than in the movie, but you hear from Tumnus in the book. He speaks of it being always winter and never Christmas.
Mm-hmm. And because there's no
very, very important, and I think it was a missed opportunity in the movie. Always winter and never Christmas. Always winter and never Christmas. Just winter constantly. And then the first sign of spring is Christmas. It's a very thematic resonance, and it also connects with the whole situation with Aslan because the coming of the Messiah, Obviously, Father Christmas is not the Messiah, but he is heralding the coming of Aslan in a way.
Yeah.
He is heralding the witch's power weakening. And shortly after that sequence, we have the whole waterfall scene. But after the waterfall scene, we actually get to see the cherry blossoms forming on the tree amid the winter frost. And we get to see the darkness is going away. Darkness is losing its power just in the mere presence of Aslan.
Yeah.
And I think having Father Christmas there further emphasizes that. And I love the line that they added in where he says, things do tend to pile up when you've been gone 100 years.
The only thing that was missing in that moment was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Come on.
There you go.
That was the only thing that was missing,
And Olive.
Yes. But Edmund, we were kind of talking about how Lucy, I kind of view Lucy as kind of represents this kind of what is it again? The kind of the faith of a child type of personality, very
Definitely.
much in that vein. I view Edmund as a worshiper, or not a worshiper, but kind of a worldly idealist. He very much is indulged with the ideas of the world, and so many, in this movie, do you get the sense that I liked how his mentality kind of comes from the fact that his father isn't there and that he misses his dad, and that's causing him to be rebellious somewhat. I don't know what the exact context of, or the exact roots of why he's acting this way, but looking at the Edmund character going forward, after you get the sense that he's very bitter and that that he just wants things his way, or he wants nothing to do with his family. I don't know. It's a very interesting kind of complex mentality of what's the chip on his shoulder, and then when he meets the White Witch, you sense that he wants to be better than them. He wants to be superior to them, because she's promising him these earthly, wealth. She's promising him earthly pleasures and the possibility of being king, all that stuff. So he's definitely a follower of the world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You were kind of criticizing the performance that the actor gives. I actually find his performance to be very convincing. I think he's possibly the second best actor in the film. I wasn't
really having any issue with his performance. It's actually the way Edmund is written.
Okay.
In the film, I think in the film he's somewhat neutered because Edmund in the book they do not have the father subplot as far as him acting out because of that. Really, just in the book, it's because he's reached a certain age and decided he wants to be nasty and he wants to get his way through manipulation and intimidation. And he is frustrated because he can't do that with his older siblings, and so he takes that out on his younger sibling. And that's a natural thing that'll, it shouldn't be. It's sin, but it's a natural thing that young kids do. And he's trying to act older than he really is. He's trying to be a smarty pants know-it-all. and he's a villain in the beginning. And
Yeah.
I think the fact that he comes around in the end, and that the brother who is so tragically evil, comes around and becomes King Edmund the Just. I feel like that's a much better redemption story, and I feel like that's one of the things in Beauty and the Beast, the new one coming out. This is a slight tangent, but I think it's important. Maybe we should have covered this in weekly segments, but I've heard rumors that the Beast might actually be getting a subplot where his father was actually the one who turned away the Enchantress, and the curse was for the entire family and castle, and he blames his dad for everything. And I
Another family dilemma. Oh my gosh, I don't know.
And I feel like that neuters the Beast so much because he was evil. I'm tired of this misunderstanding thing in fiction. It's like people can't forgive somebody for being bad because they turn good, and I don't understand that mentality in Hollywood.
I'm sick and tired of it.
It's such a problem in this movie, with Narnia, because while Edmund is very well played by Skandar Keynes. Skandar Keynes is a very good actor. I've actually seen him in something else. I just can't think of it off the top of my head, and I enjoyed him in that too. He's a good actor, and he does a great job with the material. I just feel like they neutered the character of Edmund by making him misunderstood instead of just plain evil to begin with.
I don't know about the misunderstood aspect, because I guess I get the fact that he is very much, a bad boy, very bad boy, and very.
But they're giving him an excuse
with the dad subplot.
Yeah.
Honestly, here's the thing. I mean, the whole thing with the dad is not very well explored to begin with. I mean, I may have said that a little earlier that maybe that's where it's coming from or what have you. But the movie honestly doesn't really play enough with that to make it say, like, okay, this is where it comes from. This is where this mentality comes from. I just wish it wasn't there at all. Yeah. I think it kind of works. I mean, the thing is that they don't really play with it a lot. I mean, it's more of a jumping pad than anything else. But kind of going back to the White Witch sequence, I liked how, well, first of all, Tilda Swinton, my gosh, one of the greatest actresses of our modern times.
She is fantastic.
Oh my gosh. First of all, I think she's far better than the BBC actress from the original BBC. Yeah. Oh my gosh, she was way over the top. And
leaps and bounds.
She was way over the top. And here, what I like about the witch is that she uses her subtlety is what makes her dangerous. Because she shows up and you're just like, you don't know what to make of her. You don't know if she seems, I mean, and that's a credit to Tilda Swinton, who can play peaceful and calm, but yet in the inside is conniving and is manipulating or is planning so much. She's setting forward like so much strings in her into motion. And what I love about, her first scenes with Edmund, she's manipulating him. She's playing him for a fool. She's playing up his mentality. And I do find it interesting that, Lewis went with a woman to be the representation of true evil in Narnia. Which I don't know do you know why Lewis went with this type of character or with a woman to represent evil in Narnia?
I can't speak to a specific motivation, but I can speak to the fact that he was very interested in myth and legend and studied it under J.R. Tolkien. The fact is that there is one particular archetype that goes through a lot of fairy tales, and that is the evil woman. Your Maleficents, your in more modern times Ursula's or the Sea Witch in Hans Christian Andersen's tale. You have a lot of these characters on down through the years in fairy tales where you create something that is beautiful and terrible. It's a very good contrast. Something that is manic and scary as opposed to something more dominating, world-eating kind of force, or even slightly different than a trickster, something that is so vain and chaotic. And make no mistake, while the witch is poised and graceful, she is also very chaotic in this movie, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy in Tilda Swinton's performance. I really just think it came down to the archetype of the evil woman, which there have been women in history that have been that way. If anyone wants to ever look it up, I think one of the big inspirations for that particular character is the Bloody Countess and her confidant. I cannot remember her name off the top of my head, but she was thought to be a witch. But the witch character, the witch evil woman archetype, is very, very potent, and I think that's what C.S. Lewis wanted, was something that was seductive and alluring for Edmund, so that it wasn't such a blatant betrayal, and it was more of a... It also contrasts with Aslan, it's a masculine lion with a mane, versus this very beautiful feminine form. It's two of the most beautiful things you can think of, but one is very masculine and one is very feminine.
Yeah.
There's great contrast there. So
and I think that's what makes it so interesting. She's a woman, he's a lion, but with the woman, she's alluring, the earthly appeal, that sense of what she can provide, the Turkish delights, which that looked good, and I still have no idea what Turkish delights really are. It looks like jelly or something like that.
I'll fill you in. Turkish delight actually tastes very good. Have you ever had sort of a firm jelly kind of, a jelly like gummy type thing, but it actually your teeth just sink into it. It does and just come right together. They don't bounce back.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
It just sinks. Yeah.
Your teeth just literally sink into it. Think of that with a fruit flavor inside, possibly nuts, though not always, and frosted sugar on the outside. I, being the oldest in my family, identified always the most with Peter. I think that I really enjoyed the scene where Mogrim, the captain of the guard, the wolf, he confronts Peter on the ice at the waterfall scene, and Peter chooses the pacifist way, and thankfully successfully gets his siblings and the beavers to safety, but he in a sense sacrificed his own agency, so to speak. He's gone out, he's trying to just save the day as best he can and just trying to make it by, but he's sort of rejecting this notion of the prophecy, this notion of what his destiny is to be. He just wants to take care of his family, and it's too much responsibility for him. He feels like he's afraid of failing. And when he does fight Mogrim, and Mogrim jumps at him and he puts his sword through him, it's almost a baptism of blood, even though we don't see any blood. It's very an interesting situation. Aslan saying "clean your sword," even though it's a very brief moment in the movie, it's a little bit more focused on in the book. The fact that if you're going to be a king, you can't have blood on your hands, you can't have blood on your sword, you must wipe it away. There's very significant resonance to that. You're not a king of war, you're a king of peace, and you have to always remember that. And the fact that Peter becomes Sir Peter Wolfsbane, before he becomes king, that he proved himself just by the fact that he stood up. And he said no, you're not taking my sister.
Yeah.
There's there's and the weight on him when he finds out Aslan's dead in the movie. He doesn't find that out in the book, but still the fact that he has to lead the army. There's so much with Peter, man. Like, I could go on and on.
No, absolutely. There's, I think, again, I just don't know if the actor kind of conveys that kind of
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if he has the means to kind of convey that weight to him. But another thing that I wanted to kind of bring up was well, first of all, that line, I always roll my eyes when he says, please don't, when the wolf finally meets the girls, he says, please don't run away. We want to, what does he say? It's just so weird.
We're tired, and we want it, and we want to make this quick or something like that.
And we want to kill you. Come on.
That to me, that's one of the worst performances in the movie, and it's not because that voice actor is bad or anything like that, but Mogrim to me / Fenris Ulf, because this is a weird little fact, for whatever reason, in the original American release of the Chronicles of Narnia, they changed Mogrim's name to Fenris Ulf.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Random thing, but I grew up with knowing him as Fenris Ulf until I found out later it's Mogrim. But whatever the case may be, Mogrim, he's like one of the only American accents in the entire thing.
Yeah,
it just feels really out of place.
Absolutely. I was like, this is not gelling with me very well. And that line delivery just does not work for me.
I mean, Aureus kind of has an American accent, which I like the inclusion of Aureus, the centaur general.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I wasn't a fan of the naming convention because we have centaurs in other books that have different, much more Narnian names. Aureus is very Greek. And they even have a horse in there named Philip. The naming was kind of weird. It's not a horse's name in Narnia. They have anyway.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. You were kind of talking about Peter and the struggle that he goes through and what he represents in the story. Susan, and you kind of mentioned that Susan is a character that is kind of just there. She doesn't really have much to do in the story. What I like in this movie, I like that she is not necessarily bossy, but I think she's struggling with being that person to keep the family together. That kind of trying to be that mother, she took her mother's advice of, what did she tell her? You know what part I'm talking about, right? The part where before she goes off, she tells her, oh gosh, what did she say? I can't remember. But, I think she's given some advice by her mother, and I think she takes it literally, way too literally, and then she's trying to be that mother figure. And I think that's kind of maybe her, I would say her downfall, but it is kind of presented as maybe something that one of her flaws, maybe, that she's maybe trying too hard, or maybe she's just, I don't know. What do you think of that stuff right there, that whole idea of trying to be the mother figure?
Well, I think that it was sort of an incomplete story arc. They kind of set it up and never really finished it. What I would have liked to have seen, and I like the fact that they did flesh out Susan, I just don't think they did a particularly good job at it.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, like I said, I seriously think she has like 8 lines in the entire book. It's very, very little. She... I really feel like there should have been a moment, and maybe there is on the cutting room floor, where she goes aside with Peter and tells him he's done a fantastic job, better than she could have ever done. She's proud of him, and she's sorry for nagging him. Mm-hmm. Something as simple as that. Something as simple as an acknowledgement that I know we're on the same team. I know we're both trying really hard, and you've done a great job. Thank you. Yeah. That would have completed the story arc and done very well, I feel like. Also, there's another thing that's kind of weird, is I don't like Peter not really verbally reconciling with Edmund. While he does kind of facially express, thanks at Edmund's reform and whatever, when he says try not to wander off, and Edmund kind of laughs at it,
Mm-hmm.
It's not an apology.
No.
You know what I mean?
Well, here's the funny thing. They embrace after when he's been stabbed by the witch, and then after they kind of embrace, he says Yeah. And he's kind of laughing and crying at the same time. It's like, yeah, why aren't you, what does he say?
Why don't you do what you're told?
Why don't you do what you're told or something? And I think, the movie, there's a lot of like these little setups, verbal setups that are kind of like, that are verbally exchanged later on in the film. It's like the turnaround and all that stuff, that whole line. And that movie really plays with that way, way too much in this movie.
Yeah. I agree.
And, I think we'll go, let's go into the Aslan stuff. I do want to talk about the animals real quickly because I just recently watched Prince Caspian 2, which I'm going to leave my thoughts for Prince Caspian for another time, but I thought the animals in that film looked far superior than they do here. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, there was definitely an increase in practical effects as well as better CGI for Prince Caspian.
The beavers look terrible, I thought.
I'm sorry?
The beavers did not look good in the scenes. I mean, they looked fine. I mean, they did enough of a job to blend them in very well with the settings, but looking at where they went afterwards, that was less superior job, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely. I hear you there. As far as, I don't have a lot of an opinion on that. We can move into Aslan.
Yeah,
I do think picking Liam Neeson. Originally, who they had cast to play Aslan, and they decided like halfway through the recording process, this just isn't working, we have to change.
I want to say it was either the following actors. I think it was either Alan Rickman, Russell Crowe, or Jeremy Irons, and I could be completely wrong.
You are way off. You know who it was? It was Brian Cox.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Brian Cox has an amazing
Brian Cox
voice.
Was originally cast as Aslan.
Really? What was going on?
Well, they decided after listening to it back that his voice was not quite as low as they wanted it to be for Aslan, and they could do a certain amount of editing, but it just wasn't quite exactly what they wanted. They liked his inflection, they liked the general sound of his voice, but he sounded a lot lower in some previous movies when he had been smoking for a time or something like that. I don't remember exactly. He had something done or lost some weight or something, and he just sounded a lot higher than they had anticipated. And so they decided to go with Liam Neeson instead, and I think Liam Neeson was the perfect choice.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And the thing with Liam Neeson is that with this role as well, he's continuing the trend of the father figure in a massive way. I mean, he's still. This is the ultimate father figure right here when what he symbolizes. He has played, Qui-Gon Jinn, Ra's al Ghul, the Taken, and Aslan, and I noticed there was something really interesting in the voice. Like, I noticed that it didn't feel like it was coming from the same environment. Obviously it was recorded later on, but there's something in the mixing of the voice that makes it feel like it's not necessarily in the environment, like it's not matching the fitting the environment, but it's like coming from something else, like it's something much more unworldly, like it's out of this world. Does that make any sense? I don't know if you noticed that.
Absolutely, and I think that was absolutely on purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
When I first watched it and heard it, I thought it was bad mixing, like you said. But like the more I paid attention to it, the more I was like, "Wow, no, they're essentially like making this voice come from everywhere." Yeah, which was essentially what the mix was. Like they have the mix centered on the character first and foremost, but then they actually, I think, if I remember, I actually did a study on the mix, and essentially what I think they do, if I remember correctly, is, it's been a while, they actually put the voice in all the speakers, but very, very low.
Huh, okay.
which is a very interesting feeling because it feels like you're being surrounded by this voice.
Huh.
You know,
Yeah,
it's an omnipresence.
Yes, that's the word. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, that's a very good word. Now, in terms of the Aslan look, great. I think he's the best looking lion, or the best looking animal. I think in the other films, I think he looks far better. But in this one, I think you buy into it, and you couldn't get a real lion. I mean, that was
Right.
and you couldn't do what BBC did. I mean, I actually liked the BBC lion actually in those films.
For what they did with it, it was very good.
Yeah. I mean, it was a guy in a suit essentially, and puppeteer work. But I loved what they did with it nonetheless. Now, of course, when we talk about Aslan, there is a far bigger subject with the Aslan character and what he represents. We all know. I mean, it's been talked about ad nauseum. He is the representation of Christ.
Well, it's extremely obvious.
Yeah. And I just kind of want, and I think, even for like non-believers, I still hear non-believers kind of admitting they know who he represents.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, and it's even like with Superman as well. You know that he's kind of that representation of Christ, but I think Aslan is very much straightforward. A Christ represents Christ in a much more significant way.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, I felt, it's weird, I'm a Christian and all that stuff, and I sensed the presence of Jesus. Like, this movie was literally, or even just the story, even when I've read the story, I've always sensed that he is Jesus. Like, Jesus does exist in this universe. You know what I mean? Like, he is the representation. He is the physical. He is an embodiment of Jesus. Like, Jesus does exist in that world. He's just in the form of a lion.
Right, exactly.
And
I was talking about this with Casey a good bit after we watched the movie, and they only say it once in the movie, but they say it a couple times in the book, and that is he's not a tame lion. And I think that there's a connection between the fact that Jesus essentially in this movie is a lion, and in this story is a lion, and the fact that he's not a tame lion. I think what C.S. Lewis is trying to say with this story, more than anything else, is essentially that Jesus is not tame. And what he means by that is, for all we know, for all the, omnipowerfulness of God, of Jesus, of the Trinity, there is a wildness to it that could even have created something like Narnia. And it's just giving us a fictional imagination taste of this beautiful, crazy world where a lion is Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I just don't know how else to kind of continue that part of it, because, I'm not... Yeah, there's just not really much I can really bring up in that context about, the Christ, what we were just mentioning. But I did want to mention that one of the most effective scenes, and probably one of the most memorable parts of the book, is the whole, Aslan's sacrifice. And, that has been torn to shreds in terms of, like, it has been examined thoroughly, that is actually the representation of Christ's crucifixion.
Right.
But one of and it was, the scourging of Christ, the death of Christ. Also the whole scene with Edmund, and the fact that, the law that, the witch has claim over him, which in a way is kind of like similar to, to Satan, because, for the non-believer, for those who are wicked and evil, Satan does have acclaim over. How can I say this? For those who tread in sin, who tread in who are blinded by sin, who have not repented, in a way, they do belong, while we all belong to God and all that, they are, unfortunately, under the reign of Satan. They are, without Christ, they are ultimately doomed.
Right.
If you know what I mean. I'm sorry, I'm not really speaking well tonight.
No, you're getting it, man. You're hitting it.
Yeah. But
the thing that,
and I want to kind of mention one thing. I mentioned earlier that the film, I think, gosh, I can't talk. I think the film where it really excels at is this whole Aslan, the Aslan material. And I think, everything, I actually honestly, by the time we get to Aslan, I honestly forget everything about the look of the first half of kind of that having secluded look. When it opens, when Aslan appears, he literally opens the world of Narnia in a physical and spiritual way. You begin to see it for what it really is. And I mean that in a technical and in a plot-driven way. But I think the scene when he's finally walking away from the tents and from the camp, and then he's walking in the woods. I don't know if Andrew Adamson had a chance to see Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ. There's a lot of Passion of the Christ and imagery, in those moments right there. I mean, he was, or the feel of those moments when he shows up at the stone table. He's surrounded by all these horrible creatures, and then there's that one kind of bat-like creature that he's looking straight into. I
believe that's an incubus.
Okay. But what I loved about it is that the lion approaches him, that bat-like creature looks at him, and then he falls in fear. He steps back in fear.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what he represents. He knows this kind of the divine, almost like this kind of divine power that he has. And here's another thing too that the movie kind of hints at. And I think what is it called? There's what is it? He calls it the deep magic.
Yes,
that's essentially the Holy Spirit.
I would disagree.
Really? You think it's something else? What do you think it is?
The deep magic is predestination.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The deep magic is the entire design that God had, to use biblical terminology here, Genesis 3, when we have the very first prophecy that the Savior would come, from the seed of the woman would come, and he would crush the serpent's head, and the serpent would bruise his heel.
Yes.
Essentially what the deeper magic is in this particular situation, talking back to the story, is any traitor who is given to her, as Aslan explains it, if a willing and innocent substitution was made, a completely innocent substitution, then the stone table would crack and death itself would begin to work backwards. That deeper magic is a fact in our world. It is the fact that when Jesus died on the cross, the wrath of God and Satan was quelled, and Satan's head was crushed. Very literally on Golgotha. Golgotha is the place of the skull. The
stone table.
The cross was driven directly into Golgotha, the skull.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So essentially, all these mystical things that happened in real life, the tearing of the curtain in the temple, all these various things were set up before the beginning of time to supernaturally happen when a willing and completely innocent person substituted themselves on the cross. Mm-hmm. All of this was set in stone as a physical reality law of the universe. You see what I'm saying?
No, absolutely, absolutely. I get what you're saying. I'm just enjoying this because you just speak it so well.
The deeper magic.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think he even kind of goes into a little bit deeper. Well, a little bit, like he says, like, what does he say again? He says that there's a deep magic here that guides our destinies, or something like that. And I would agree with you right there, but I still think there is somewhat of more of a Holy Spirit aspect. I mean, you don't get the sense of the Trinity. There is a hint that Aslan has a father in the books. I think there is a hint about that. And
the Great Emperor Beyond the Sea.
Yes, the Great Emperor. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I got that.
They don't mention him in the movie, which is a crying shame, because they could have very easily put him in during the coronation. Aslan saying, "In the name of the Great Emperor Beyond the Sea."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't. Do they hint at that in the other 3 films, or?
I don't think so. I don't think it's ever brought up.
That's interesting. But I think what the filmmakers really excel at are these moments right here. They really, I mean, other than those moments, I mean, I don't sense, I mean, because that was a controversial thing going on in Hollywood at the time, that when they got the film rights, a lot of filmmakers did not want to play with that at all. They were trying very hard. They tried so hard to get that out of there.
Mm-hmm. They actually were going to put in, this is another thing that was going on during the time. I kept up with this, if you couldn't tell, when it was being made. But you mostly use NarniaWeb.com for those who are wondering. It's still a very good site. If you want to know about the Silver Chair upcoming from an independent studio, you can check that out. But
actually, no, anyway. It's Sony.
I'm sorry?
Sony is now producing Silver Chair.
Yes, they are. Mm-hmm, yep. So you can check all that information out. I like NarniaWeb.com for my news references. But as far as all that goes, with the coronation scene, they were actually going to add in this whole thing, and they kind of left some of it in there. This whole thing where Aslan was crowning them in the name of the 4 winds of Narnia. And he didn't do that exactly, but in the movie he did say, to the great northern sky, High King Peter, all this kind of stuff. And they left that part in. But
they gave it more as a title, more than a actual.
Right, yeah, he didn't crown them all in the name of the 4 winds, blah blah blah, which is very pantheistic and not at all what the book is about. In the book, he crowns them in the name of the Great Emperor Beyond the Sea, God the Father, essentially. And I think that it's a shame that they weren't able to completely change it, but the fans heard about an early version of the film that was released, and people had seen it, and the people backlashed against this whole idea of the 4 winds, so much so to the point that Andrew Adamson said, just take that part out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I don't know where where Andrew Adamson lies. I mean, I don't.
Yeah. I think he's a Christian, but I don't remember
I think he's Catholic.
What denomination.
I think he's Catholic, if memory serves me right. I think
he might be.
I think he's Catholic, which is very opposite, but still, I mean, I think the movie handles, the actual death scene so impactful, in a very impactful way, that you know instantly what this scene is representing. I mean, they scourge him by cutting his manes. They do that. They pierce him, which I don't get. It looks like I think they kill him on the side, from the looks of it.
No. Well, yeah, they did. She drove the stone knife through his heart in the books, and I believe they did so in the movie too. But we don't see the blow, so we're not really sure.
This movie's PG. I think for that moment alone, I think the movie should have been PG-13, because it is very intense. It is very intense for a PG rated film.
It definitely is, but at the same time, he came back, and
I understand that. I understand
there's literally one human death, or not human, but good guy death in the entire movie, and that is the griffin that is turned into stone mid-air by the White Witch, and he like falls into the ground and crumbles into dust. Other than that, everyone else lives.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of killing though when we get to the big battle and all that.
Well, true.
Yeah. Now, gosh.
But Lucy's able to save most of them.
Yeah. Now, gosh. I guess we'll talk about the big battle sequence. And now this was the sequence. Now, in the book, you get to the battle. They're in the middle of the battle. You don't see the beginning. And I like how they add this. The whole, the tree goddesses goes to Peter's tent and says, go to battle. I got some bad news. And, that catapults, and that catapults everything into that sequence. And I've seen, that is a very well done battle sequence. And it's another reason why I'm kind of shocked the movie was PG, because, there is some cutting limbs. There are some bodies being smashed by stones. There is a lot of that stuff. And
yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that I was very pleased that they extended the Battle of Baruna. It is the first battle ever written in Narnia, and it is very, very truncated in the book. But I think they did an excellent job fleshing it out, and it feels like a real battle with all these different pieces. And I think that's the thing that sets it apart from all other fantasy movies, is you essentially have maybe 2 to 3 races in any other fantasy movie. You have 5 to maybe 8 different types of units that you deal with, as far as different ranks of soldiers and things like that with different specialized weapons and such. But in Narnia, like, on both sides, you have everything you could freaking imagine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just a little kid's, like, it's a little kid's dream to see these centaurs and cheetahs and rhinos, and versus minotaurs and cyclops and giants. It's just it's amazing to behold this fantasy world, and I think that's one of the biggest achievements, in my opinion, as far as the film goes, is the Battle of Baruna, and the fact that they've crammed so many different species and creatures into a single battle.
It's the ultimate multiracial, multicultural, multiracial type of battle.
Yeah, it really is.
That'll make any Asian black person proud. Although their skin colors, you could definitely say, there's a black centaur and all this other stuff, or.
Yeah.
Anyway, controversy, people. Anyway, now this is a moment where I think William Moseley's scenes are not good. Like, he's trying to act manly. He's trying to act tough. I don't buy it. I get that. I feel it right there. Like, he's looking out into the distance. He draws his sword, and then when he says, there's something about the delivery when he says, like, for Narnia and for Aslan. You ain't no Viggo Mortensen, dude. You ain't no Bernard Hill. You're none of those guys. So.
Oh no, he's not, and I don't think he's supposed to be. I think that's one of the main reasons Aureus is right there with him, is because the people trust Aureus.
I don't know.
I think there's a little bit. I would have appreciated, some scenes of the Narnians being like, "Are we really following this kid? Is he?" Because the Black Dwarves, are notorious for not believing in any magic, any of the old prophecies, any of the deep magic, anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
If they had some of the good black dwarves kind of questioning him, and then like Aureus walks over and they like shut up about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that would have lent credence to having him being a little bit less convincing in the leadership role. And I think it would have been better if we'd had some more. I mean, we did get Peter. I think I would have just liked to touch more of Peter in the battle, kicking butt. You know what I mean?
Well, when it comes down, oh my gosh! Here, I have another criticism to share with you. The moment when him and the White Witch have the showdown.
Yeah.
That is some I don't know. That is some horribly choreographed fight. And, like, he's just there swinging. He's like, I don't know, he's doing like this. He's doing this weird kind of, like, he's swinging, like, from horizontal and, vertical. It's a weird, I don't know. He's, like, trying to hammer down on the witch, but it's done in just this sloppy way. And you could definitely say, like, well, he's inexperienced. Okay.
Well,
true.
no, because we see the montages and stuff, and the main thing that I have issue with is actually the witch's choreography. It feels very slow. It feels like it has very little force behind it, and I don't think there was a lot of stunt work with Tilda Swinton. I think she did most of her own stunts in this movie, and it was slow, and it felt like she was carrying the full weight of the sword and that her arm was having a hard time swinging it. You know what I mean? It's just like...
I don't know. I mean, she looked like she was able to lift that sword pretty easily. Which, by the way, this woman is like a superwoman. She's like a Kryptonian,
Yeah.
But anyway, the scenes with him, when he was like there just swinging the sword, that looked horrible. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what was going on. Please, you can choreograph something like that, inexperienced a little bit better, Like, I mean, right. It's like sloppy. It's like his arms are like, he's like a Twizzler, or it's like a dummy. It's like, he's like swinging down, and his shield, like his shield arm goes behind him. It looks bad.
Yeah, I think the Twizzler arm, as you put it, is him actually being tired more than anything else. But I do agree it doesn't look good.
I don't know. And then in the end of the film, he's like Aragorn slashing away and dicing away at all these people. I don't know. It was just a weird. It was like revisiting it. It was like a little bit weird, but and then the moment that Aslan kills the witch.
Yes.
He bites down on her head, apparently. He should have had some blood in his mouth and should have been he should have had the head in his mouth. Right there, like, and he should have said, like, Peter, it's done. Like, had his head stuffed with her. I think Peter should, well, and then too, everything goes into slow-mo. Peter's like having like this Deus Ex Machina moment. It's like, what just happened? It was a weird kind of moment between him and Aslan. Like, is it supposed to? But
you know how I read that?
How did you read that?
I read that as he heard he was dead, and now he knows he's alive.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, like he's surprised that he's alive.
Yeah, I don't think it comes across super well, but it's just the fact that, we've been a little bit removed from the fact that he was told that he was still dead. So if we had some kind of, him yelling for Aslan, and then maybe like a flashback, it's like a brief, like couple second flashback to him talking with Aslan, maybe Aslan quoting something to him as kind of a pick me up, you know what I mean? Like him thinking about something Aslan said to him. And the thing with all that is, like, he's seeing Aslan, and in the books, when he first hears his name, he suddenly feels brave and like he can do anything.
Okay,
is kind of what they give as a description of when he just hears Aslan's name. So, like, hearing he's dead and then having to go into battle,
Mm-hmm.
and then seeing him again. It's what J.R. Tolkien referred to as eucatastrophe, the opposite of catastrophe,
Mm-hmm.
Something really unbelievably wonderful happening all at once.
Yeah. Now, one last thing, because obviously we all know the story. They all get home safely, and one thing that I am, the story with Lucy, she really seems to have a very personal connection. I think the second film really explores that a little bit better. That she really has that a deeper connection to Aslan in a much more spiritual manner. But I liked how earlier I mentioned that she's kind of this she has the faith of a child. I mean, essentially she is a child, but she has more belief. I think C.S. Lewis was trying to make that point that even like the smallest person can have the strongest bit of faith, and it can even come from somebody that you least expect it from. It may not be, age may have, they definitely convey that, age, her age. She was definitely somewhat mature for her age, but she definitely conveyed that sense of knowledge in a very mature way, but still maintaining the fact that she's a child. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Also, let the little children come to me.
Yes. Yes.
That's really what it's referring to, and you must be born again like a child. This childlike faith. It's definitely pulling on those specific, not tropes, scripture references.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I don't know if you know this, but Lucy Barfield was Owen Barfield's daughter, Owen Barfield being one of the Inklings along with Tolkien and Lewis. And Lucy Barfield was one of the inspirational characters for the story for C.S. Lewis. And The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is dedicated to Lucy Barfield. And when he finished the story, he dedicated it to her. He said, "When I first met you, you were a little girl, and I wanted to write a story for you. But by the time I finished it, you've grown up and you've moved on to school and are quite too old for fairy tales. It is my hope that one day you will once again be able to pick up a book and appreciate it like a little child again. Maybe when you're old and gray and I'm dead and gone, that kind of thing."
Yes, I remember that very well. I actually just read that little bit right there before we started recording. Yep. Yeah.
And so, also, one other interesting little note for those who listen to other podcasts, particularly the Reformed Pubcast, which is connected to Apologia Radio and a lot of other stuff I've told you before about, Chris. Actually, Tanner Barfield is one of the hosts of that, along with Les Lamphere, and he is directly descended from Owen Barfield. And so he actually has a direct connection to Narnia, and he still has not read the books, and I just wag my finger at him every day.
Well, that's interesting. Well,
yeah. So,
wow.
Are you familiar with the Reformed Pub?
No. You told me about it. I need to check it out. I want to check it out.
Yeah,
I do know Apology.
I'll send you a link. It's a very good Reformed Christian Facebook group.
Yeah, I need to check it out. And they do a podcast too, right?
Yeah, the Reformed Pubcast. They talk about beer and theology.
Yes, I'll definitely check that out. One thing though, I wanted to wrap up the show on two more things actually. One, you remember we were talking about the Pilgrim's Progress during the Wizard of Oz?
Yes.
I feel like this movie isn't really about it has the biblical context of Pilgrim's Progress, but Pilgrim's Progress was more about man's the Christian walk with the Lord, yes, and what we must endure in our everyday life, sin, the temptations of the world. This one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, both the film and the book, I don't feel like it is about the Christian walk as overtly as Pilgrim's Progress was. I feel like it's more about salvation. It's very much about salvation in a much more significant way. And you could say that about Pilgrim's Progress too, but Pilgrim's Progress was more about what I just mentioned. Wardrobe is more about salvation and what a person must do in order to be saved. What is the process of being saved, and what Christ did for us, and his sacrifice for us.
Right.
And it's there in Pilgrim's Progress, but this movie is more specifically about that, in my opinion.
Yes. And one of the things that is a through line for all of Narnia, it is present here. It's a little bit more present in some of the other books, but it's very present here. I've pretty much, if I was to boil down what Narnia is all about, the whole thing, and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe included, I would say that it boils down to a theme of obedience.
Mm-hmm.
While in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that's a little less centric and more centric on salvation, we do have, Peter, clean your sword. We do have this idea, like you said, of what it takes to, not from us really, but from what the cost is of salvation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Aslan was obedient. And there's definitely, and Tumnus was obedient to his conscience. There's this idea of you have to do what's right no matter the cost, which is essentially obedience. And so that's one of the things that, if we're going to do the other Narnia films, I would definitely like to track that, especially in Prince Caspian, and definitely in Voyage of the Dawn Treader too, as well. But it's such a through line through all of Narnia, this theme of obedience. And I think that's one of the reasons why he chose to do it with kids, and why it's still important to this day.
Yeah. Now we're going to go ahead and kind of wrap up our final thoughts. Joshua, do you recommend, and what are your final thoughts?
Well, I definitely recommend it. If you couldn't tell from all my gushing over it this entire review. To me, the other two films are lackluster in that they're not very faithful adaptations to the book. I think this is one of the most faithful adaptations of a fantasy movie that I have ever seen. I think it's one of the most faithful that has ever existed.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the whole situation with that particular movie, to me, it's Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's an unbelievably wonderful story that steals past the watchful dragons, as C.S. Lewis would say, to speak about the truth of Christ in a way that strips it of all the things that you feel like you're supposed to feel super solemn and special about, like Jesus and stuff. Instead, it turns it into something fun and crazy and strange and mystical, but it explores the same truth of Christ. Mm-hmm. And it can be like looking at Scripture in a different way and in a new way that helps you appreciate the truth of it that much more.
Yeah. And, I was kind of going back and forth about this. I was like, do I recommend The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? And I actually thought for a while, like, I don't think I'm going to recommend it. But you know what? I'm just going to say I recommend it. Is it one of the best fantasy films ever made? No. And I can't really judge it on that level. I can't really judge it on, like, is it Lord of the Rings? No. Is it Harry Potter? No. They're so vastly different. It's definitely one of the better fantasy films to come out at that point in time.
Definitely.
I mean,
Golden Compass, cough, cough.
What was that?
I was joking. I said Golden Compass, cough, cough.
Oh, what was that one? The Ranger Seeker? What was that one?
Oh yeah, that I don't even remember the name of that one.
And I have to say, this movie has a lot of heart. This movie maintains the biblical symbolism, the Christ imagery. I mean, it is very, very much there. And I think I have to kind of applaud them for that, for keeping that at a time when, and still, at a time when this industry is not very fond of the Christ imagery of Christ. Well, I shouldn't say that because it pokes so much at Christ, imagery and all that stuff in some films, but that it maintained that spirit to it, and I think, and I highly recommend it. I think it's honestly a very underrated movie on its own feet. Yeah. I think I think that has to do with the subsequent films and I think even the legacy of the film. And I think that's going to stem into our final little bit right here is, what is the legacy of this film? Has it stood the test of time with other people? What do you think, man? What do you think the legacy of this film has been? Do you think it's looked down in the wrong way? It's been forgotten. Where do you lie on this?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do think it was tarnished by the films that came after it. While they were good, they were not faithful adaptations. They tried to, with Caspian, this is very brief. With Caspian, they tried to, with both of them, they tried to change the structure of a book that did not lend itself to a 3-act structure and try to cram in some extra stuff with the shoehorn to make it fit a 3-act structure instead of just telling the story, and letting it be something different at the box office. And I think that, unfortunately, the two films have kind of tarnished its legacy. People got sick of the fantasy films during the time because there was so much garbage that came out after Lord of the Rings and during the middle films of Harry Potter. People just got fatigued, and I think that Narnia was definitely, even the subsequent films, they were better than a lot of what was coming out, but they weren't on the level of Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, and so people just kind of tuned it out.
Yeah.
But I think that Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is better than some of the Harry Potter movies. I think it's, not all of them, but I think some of them. And I think that as far as a legacy goes, I just want them to get to Silverchair. I want them to put that out. I want them to finish the rest of the books, and we'll see what the legacy is from there. But as far as the first 3 goes, I think everyone I've talked to, they said they loved the first one.
Yeah. Everyone that I know of, with some exceptions, pretty much liked the first one, and then as you said, the subsequent films really kind of just went down. And I actually would love to talk about Prince Caspian more in detail, because I think that's actually kind of a better film than people give it credit for, actually, and even better than what I had remembered. But the funny thing was that Narnia, the funny thing about, I don't want to repeat what you just said, because I'm kind of in the same boat. I think the subsequent films were coming out at a time when other fantasy films were just plain garbage. I mean, what we just mentioned, the Seventh Son, whatever that movie was, or something like that. That came out with Jeff Bridges. The Ranger Seeker,
Spiderwick Chronicles was actually okay, but it wasn't like a blow you away one,
Yeah, but then you had the resurgence of fantasy with the Game of Thrones. But I think that's a
different kind of fantasy.
What?
That's a different kind of fantasy, though. Like Lord of the Rings was the high fantasy fad, and Game of Thrones is the low fantasy fad.
Well, I think it's really bringing in real world ideas and very, very atheist.
Which literally you call that low fantasy. It's trying to make it more of a real world kind of situation, sort of thing. And high fantasy is more like you would see in Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is pretty much the epitome of high fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think Narnia is one of the best hybrids of high fantasy and fairy tale, as far as the story goes, that has ever come to screen.
Yeah. What about Harry Potter? I view those movies more so as modern fantasies. That's how I view
have
them.
not seen all of them, but yes, they definitely fit more of I don't. I hate using the phrase because I think it's an outdated phrase, but I don't think there's an updated phrase, and that's teeny bopper. It's very very, very, very teenagery, and Narnia is much more of a, like he said in the whole dedication to Lucy Barfield. It's a story that you may love as a child, but then when you revisit it as an adult, it has new life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we can go ahead and wrap things up.
Yeah. But yeah, you kind of mentioned. I do want to get your thoughts on this real quickly, and then we'll wrap it up right here.
Sure.
The filmmaker Mark Gordon, who's going to be the producer on the next set of films, says that it's going to be a complete reboot.
Yeah.
And that it's not going to have any ties. Apparently, it's not going to have any ties to the previous films. And I'm thinking to myself, no, don't do that. Use what you've had. Because then we're going to have to restart from scratch all over again.
I don't know that we will. We can't really get enough of the actors, I feel like, to really make it worthwhile. And even if we did, they wouldn't look right. Now, if we got to the last battle and we used, the original actors for the main children and stuff like that, and they were older, that would be fine. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But the guy who played Eustace cannot, and Don Treader cannot be Eustace in the silver chair.
Are you kidding me? He actually doesn't look that old at all. If you look at his new picture,
yeah, I have, and he's a lot older than he was in Don Treader, and I really don't think he can play that much younger. It's been so long since Don Treader. I really don't think that would have been a good idea.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the whole reboot idea. I don't like that whole idea. I feel like, because then it makes, and honestly, I hate to say this and I hate to exaggerate, it kind of makes the three films, it makes it seem like this huge big tragedy, like this huge franchise tragedy. I don't want it to feel that way at all. Because
I don't think it will, because we're still going to hopefully get all the Narnia films. We're going to get, hopefully, after the Silver Chair, The Horse and His Boy, which is the one that people have really been worried about because of the Arab nature of some of the villains and one of the protagonists. But I really do think that a reboot is what we need. I think that Silver Chair is an excellent book to reboot with because of the beginning being so ambiguous. Eustace says, I had these adventures with my cousins the other year. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's a great starting point because you can introduce Jill, you can have a newer Eustace, but it can be the same story. It's just that we have some different actors, but it's returning to Narnia, and it's a different kind of world,
I don't know, because you have a lot. To be very honest, I don't even know if it's going to even happen. I mean, it seems like it's making progress.
Mm-hmm.
I need, honestly, when they announce who they're getting back in the films, and once they start rolling cameras, then I'll believe in it again. I just don't even believe it's going to happen. That's how much I'm looking at this franchise right now. I don't even think it's going to happen.
Right.
And I hate to say that,
well, let's just hope it does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And I'm actually one of those people who didn't even see Don Treader in theaters. After Prince Caspian, the thing was that when that movie came out, Don Treader, it was a toss-up between that and Tron Legacy, and I happened to choose Tron Legacy, which was awesome. But anyway, that's another story for another time. Anyway, so Joshua, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up tonight's show. Where can people find more of your work?
You can find my stuff at rhymeandspace.com. It's under maintenance at the moment, but we're working on it. You can also check me out on Facebook. It's pretty easy to get to me. If you can't find me by searching Joshua David Ling, then type in facebook.com/joshua.ling.5 and hit me with a message. I'm open to anybody. Hit me with a friend request. So,
okay. And you can also find us on iTunes, Story to Screen on iTunes. Please leave us a review. We could definitely use some more reviews and star ratings as well. Please also like us on Facebook, Twitter. Also, I want to say thank you very much to some of the recent people who have commented on our show. It has been very positive. We are very happy with just the positive feedback that we've received. We even got a response from a fan in Denmark, actually. So
Cool.
that is awesome. That is awesome that we've actually reached people that far in other countries. So anyway, folks, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. I am your host, Chris, and we'll catch you next time with. Well, we don't know what we're gonna do next. I mean, we're probably gonna do some Christmas movies. You know, we haven't.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah, and by the way, do you consider this a Christmas movie?
This thing?
Yeah.
Oh, this one, Narnia. Sorry, I thought it was like what film? Yes, I do. I do absolutely consider it a Christmas film.
Anyway, folks, I'm your host, Chris, and I wish you all a good night. Cheers.
Ow!